What if I told you that 67 years after it sank to the ocean floor, there are still rooms inside the SS Andrea Doria that no human eye has ever seen? What's been trapped down there all this time, waiting in the darkness? Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, resting on the sandy bottom, lies one of the most beautiful passenger ships ever built. The SS Andrea Doria was once called the Floating Palace of Italy. People from all over the world wanted to travel on this magnificent vessel. It had fancy dining rooms, beautiful artwork on the walls, and cabins that looked like fancy hotel rooms. But in 1956, something terrible happened. The ship collided with another vessel on a foggy night and slowly tilted over before sinking into the cold, dark water. Many people were saved, but the ship itself was lost forever. Or so everyone thought. For many decades, divers have visited the wreck. They've taken pictures of the outside. They've swum through some hallways. But there's a big problem. The Andrea Doria rests really, really deep underwater. It's so deep that humans can only stay down there for a few minutes before it becomes dangerous. The pressure from all that water above pushes down on everything. It's like having hundreds of elephants standing on top of you. Because of this, many parts of the ship have never been explored. Entire sections remain sealed, hidden, mysterious. Nobody knows what's inside those rooms. Nobody has seen what was left behind when the ship went down. Now something has changed. A brand new mission has begun. Scientists and ocean explorers decided it was finally time to see what's been hiding inside those sealed cabins of the SS Andrea Doria all these years. But instead of sending divers who could only stay for minutes, they sent something that could stay down there for hours. They sent a robotic submarine. This isn't just any robot. It's equipped with powerful lights that can pierce through the darkness. It has cameras that can see in places where sunlight has never reached. It has mechanical arms that can open doors and move objects. And most importantly, it can be controlled from a ship on the surface, where experts guide every movement. The team prepared for months. They studied old blueprints of the Andrea Doria. They looked at photographs from 1956, trying to figure out exactly where the unexplored cabins might be. They knew the ship had tilted onto its side when it sank, which meant rooms that were once upright are now sideways. Doors that once opened easily might now be blocked by furniture or debris. This wouldn't be easy. But they were determined. When the robotic submarine first descended through the dark water, it took nearly 30 minutes just to reach the wreck. As it got closer, the ship's massive hull came into view through the murky water. Even after 67 years, you could still see the elegant lines of the vessel. The robot slowly approached one of the outer walls, searching for an entrance. The team had identified a section of the ship where several first-class cabins were located. These were fancy rooms where wealthy passengers stayed during the voyage. If anything valuable or interesting remained, it would likely be there. The robot found a doorway that led inside. Slowly, carefully, it maneuvered through the opening. The mechanical arms reached out and gently pushed aside a piece of twisted metal that was blocking the path. And then, it was inside. The first thing the cameras picked up was the incredible stillness. Nothing moves down here except for the occasional fish swimming by. There's no sound except for the hum of the robot's motors. The water is so cold it feels like entering a freezer. But what really strikes you is how everything seems frozen in time. The pressure of the deep water makes this place feel almost spiritual, like entering an underwater cathedral. This isn't just a pile of broken metal and rust. This is a monument to a moment in history. Every object, every room, every tiny detail tells a story about the people who were here that night in 1956. You can almost imagine them walking these very hallways, laughing, talking, excited about reaching New York City the next morning. They had no idea what was about to happen. As the robot moved deeper into the ship, the first cabins came into view. The team controlling it from above held their breath. What would they find? The robot's lights illuminated a long corridor. Doors lined both sides, some closed, some hanging open at strange angles because the whole ship is tilted. The robot approached the first open door and carefully entered. Inside, the scene was absolutely haunting. Furniture floated slightly, still somehow attached to the corners of the room where it had been bolted down decades ago. A small dresser remained against one wall, its drawers hanging open. The mirror above it was shattered into 1,000 pieces, each shard reflecting the robot's lights in distorted patterns. The bed frame was still there, though the mattress had long since deteriorated. But then the cameras focused on something that made everyone gasp. On top of the dresser, sitting there as if someone had just placed it moments before, was a clock. And it had stopped. The hands pointed to 11:45. That was the exact time when the collision happened. The moment when everything changed, the moment when this beautiful ship began its slow descent to the bottom of the ocean. The robot continued through the cabins. In another room, suitcases lay scattered on the floor, some still partially closed. You could see the remnants of clothing inside them. These were people's belongings, things they had carefully packed for their journey. Maybe a mother had folded these clothes for her children. Maybe a businessman had organized his papers in that leather case. Each item represents a human being, a life, a story. The robot's cameras captured everything in detail, and the team watching from above felt a deep sense of connection to these long-ago travelers. In one cabin, something particularly touching appeared on the screen. Small toys were scattered near what used to be a bed. A little wooden horse, a doll with faded, painted features. These belonged to children. Kids who were probably excited about the adventure of crossing the ocean. Kids who might have been playing with these very toys just hours before the disaster. The team made sure to photograph everything carefully, treating each object with respect. Another room revealed handwritten letters, amazingly still legible despite being underwater for 67 years. The ink had faded, but you could make out words in Italian. Someone had been writing home, telling their family about the wonderful voyage, about the food, about the new friends they'd made on board. That letter never got sent. It stayed here, in this cabin, preserved by the cold water and the darkness. As the robotic submarine moved from room to room, something incredible became clear. Despite being underwater for nearly 7 decades, many of these cabins still contained recognizable objects. Clothes still hung in closets, though they were now just fragments of fabric. Shoes remained on the floor where they'd been placed. Bottles of perfume, hairbrushes, books, photographs, all sorts of personal items had survived in some form. It was like walking through a museum exhibit, except this museum was never meant to be visited. Then something unexpected happened. The robot was making its way down another corridor when suddenly it stopped. The team controlling it looked at the video feed and saw why. A huge pile of debris blocked the passageway. Metal beams, pieces of wall, furniture, all sorts of wreckage had collapsed and created a barrier. For a moment, it seemed like the exploration would have to end here. But then, one of the operators noticed something. There was a small gap in the debris, a narrow opening between 2 fallen beams, and through that gap they could see something. Another cabin, one that appeared to be completely untouched. This was the moment they'd been hoping for. After all these years, after all these expeditions to the Andrea Doria, they'd found a room that nobody had ever entered. Not since the ship sank, not in 67 years. The question was, could they get the robot through that tight space? The operators worked carefully, maneuvering the mechanical arms to widen the gap just slightly. Inch by inch, the robot squeezed through. It took almost 20 minutes of careful work, but finally it emerged on the other side. What they saw took everyone's breath away. This cabin was different from all the others. It was remarkably intact. While other rooms showed obvious signs of decay and collapse, this one seemed almost preserved. How was this possible? Why did this particular space resist the ravaging effects of time when so many others had deteriorated? The team had theories. Perhaps the way the ship had settled on the ocean floor created a pocket that protected this room. Perhaps the door had remained sealed, preventing currents from entering and disturbing things. Whatever the reason, they were now looking at something extraordinary. The robot's light swept across the room, revealing details that seemed impossible after so many years underwater. A pair of leather shoes sat neatly beside the bed, positioned as if someone had just stepped out of them. The leather was darkened and damaged, but the shoes were still recognizably shoes. They hadn't disintegrated into nothing like so many other fabric items. Next to the shoes, a book floated in the water, suspended in that eerie way that objects move underwater. The pages were swollen and the text was certainly unreadable, but the book itself remained whole. It drifted there like a ghost, released from a shelf during the sinking but never settling to the floor. As the robot moved its cameras around the cabin, something else caught their attention. At the far end of the room, there was another door. This one was slightly open, just a few inches. And through that gap, something reflected the robot's lights. Something metallic, something shiny. After 67 years in saltwater, very few things would still have that kind of reflective quality. What could it be? The team decided to investigate. They carefully maneuvered the robotic submarine across the room toward that partially open door. As it got closer, they could hear a strange sound through the robot's audio sensors. It was a creaking noise, low and slow, almost like the ship itself was groaning. Metal grinding against metal somewhere in the structure. The Andrea Doria is constantly settling, constantly shifting ever so slightly on the ocean floor. Every movement creates these sounds. It's like the vessel is still alive in some way, still reacting to what happened all those years ago. The robot's mechanical arm reached out toward the door handle. The metal was heavily corroded, covered in rust and sea growth. But the arm gripped it firmly and began to pull. Slowly, the door opened wider. The hinges protested with that same grinding sound. Everyone watching the video feed leaned closer to their screens. What would be behind this door? What had remained hidden in this sealed space for nearly 7 decades? As the door swung open, the robot's lights illuminated what lay beyond. It was a small storage area, like a closet. And there, sitting on a shelf, was a metal box. It appeared to be made of steel or iron, about the size of a shoebox. Despite being underwater all this time, it seemed to be sealed. The surface was covered in corrosion, but the box itself looked intact. This was significant. If the box was truly sealed, whatever was inside might have been protected from the water. It could contain papers, documents, photographs, maybe even valuables. The team knew they had to retrieve it. The robot extended its mechanical arms and carefully grasped the box. It lifted it from the shelf with surprising gentleness. These robots are incredibly precise, able to handle delicate objects despite their mechanical nature. The box was placed in the robot's collection basket, a special compartment designed to safely store items for the journey back to the surface. Whatever secrets this box held, they would soon be revealed. But not yet. First, there was more to explore. As the robot backed away from the closet and scanned the cabin one more time, something else became apparent. This wasn't just any cabin. This had been someone's home for the duration of the voyage. Personal touches were everywhere. A framed picture still hung on the wall, though the photograph inside was long gone. Hooks near the door still held what might have been a coat or jacket, now just threads of fabric. A writing desk in the corner had its chair still tucked in, as if the occupant had just stood up and left, intending to return in a few minutes. But they never returned. When the collision happened that night in 1956, chaos erupted throughout the ship. People grabbed what they could and rushed to the lifeboats. Many cabins were abandoned in seconds, left exactly as they were at the moment of impact. This cabin was one of them. Everything remained where it had been at 11:45 p.m. on that fateful night. It's a snapshot of a moment, frozen forever beneath the waves. The robot continued its exploration, moving to other sections of the ship that had never been accessed before. The team had planned this mission to last several hours, and they intended to make the most of it. Each new room revealed more artifacts, more stories, more connections to the past. In one cabin, they found what appeared to be a child's drawing, miraculously preserved between the pages of a waterlogged book. The simple crayon lines showed a ship on water with a smiling sun above. Some child had drawn this picture of the Andrea Doria itself, probably during the voyage. That child had no way of knowing their artwork would survive longer than the ship. Another cabin revealed something that made the team pause and reflect. On a small table, there was a tea set. Not just any tea set, but an elegant porcelain service with cups, saucers, and a teapot. Amazingly, several pieces were still intact. Porcelain is fragile, yet somehow these delicate items had survived the sinking, the impact with the ocean floor, and 67 years of pressure and cold. The cups were arranged as if someone had been about to serve tea when the collision occurred. You could almost imagine the scene. Passengers sitting together, enjoying an evening refreshment, chatting about their plans for arriving in America. Then the sudden impact, the confusion, the rush to evacuate. The tea service abandoned mid-pour, left to settle to the bottom with everything else. These aren't just objects. They're memories made tangible. Each item tells us something about the people who were here. The Andrea Doria was carrying over 200 passengers and crew when it sank. Most of them survived, thanks to a massive rescue operation that brought other ships to the scene. But their belongings, their memories, their pieces of life, all of that went down with the ship. And now, all these years later, we're finally seeing what they left behind. The robotic submarine pressed deeper into the unexplored sections. The operators were being very careful, constantly checking the robot's position and making sure it didn't get stuck or damaged. This machine was expensive and valuable, and losing it would mean the end of the mission. But the rewards of exploration were too great to turn back now. Each new discovery added to our understanding of what happened that night and what life was like aboard this magnificent vessel. As the robot rounded a corner in what appeared to be a service corridor, something unusual appeared on the cameras. There was an opening in the wall, but it was blocked by a heavy pile of metal debris and broken equipment. This wasn't just random wreckage. It looked almost organized, as if the metal had been deliberately stacked there. The team studied the video feed carefully. Why would this particular opening be blocked off? What was on the other side? They decided to investigate further. Using the robot's mechanical arms, they began carefully removing pieces of debris from the pile. It was slow, painstaking work. Each piece had to be lifted and moved aside without causing the rest of the pile to collapse. After nearly an hour of work, they'd created a small opening. The robot's camera peered through, and what they saw was puzzling. Behind the debris was another corridor, but this one looked different. It appeared to be in better condition than the areas they'd been exploring. The walls were less corroded. There was less sea growth. It was as if this section had been protected somehow. But there was something else, something that made everyone watching sit up and pay attention. On the inside of the debris pile, they could see marks, scratches in the metal, wear patterns. These marks suggested that the debris hadn't fallen here randomly during the sinking. It looked like it had been placed here deliberately, like someone had blocked this corridor from the inside. But why? What would make crew members or passengers block off a section of the ship during an emergency? It didn't make sense. The team discussed what to do. They could spend more time clearing the debris and exploring what lay beyond. But the robot's battery was starting to run low, and they still needed to make the long journey back to the surface with all the artifacts they'd collected. The metal box was secure in the collection basket, along with several smaller items they'd carefully retrieved from various cabins. They'd already achieved more than they'd hoped for. But this new mystery was tantalizing. What was behind that blocked corridor? Why had it been sealed? They made the difficult decision to mark the location carefully and return on a future mission. The robot took detailed video and photographs of the blocked area, recording its exact position within the ship. Then, reluctantly, the operators began the process of guiding the submarine back through the maze of corridors toward the exit. As it retraced its path, the robot's lights swept one last time across the cabins of the SS Andrea Doria, the rooms that had waited 67 years to be seen, the spaces that held so many untold stories. As the robot finally emerged from the ship and began its ascent through the dark water toward the surface, the team reflected on what they'd found. This wasn't just an archaeological expedition. It wasn't just about recovering artifacts or taking pictures. It was about connecting with the past in a very real way. Every object they'd seen, every room they'd explored, represented actual human lives. Real people who laughed and cried, who had dreams and fears, who boarded the Andrea Doria expecting to start new lives in America. The ship itself is more than just a wreck on the ocean floor. It's a time capsule. It's a memorial. It's a reminder that history isn't something distant and abstract. It's made up of individual moments, individual choices, individual lives. When you see a child's toy lying on the floor of a cabin, you're not just seeing an object. You're seeing that child. You're connecting with their experience, their excitement about the journey, their fear when the ship began to sink. And perhaps that's why places like the Andrea Doria matter so much. not because of the ship itself, although it was certainly beautiful and historically significant, but because of what it represents. Every sunken vessel, every abandoned building, every archaeological site is a doorway to the past. It's a way for us to reach across time and touch the lives of people who came before us, to understand them, to remember them, to honor their stories. Today, with modern technology like robotic submarines, we can revisit places that were thought to be lost forever. We can explore depths that humans could never survive in. We can spend hours examining details that a diver could only glimpse for seconds. This opens up incredible possibilities for understanding history. But it also raises questions. Should we disturb these underwater grave sites? Should we remove artifacts or leave everything exactly as it is? There's no easy answer. Different people have different opinions about the right way to handle these situations. What everyone agrees on, though, is that we need to approach these places with respect. The Andrea Doria isn't just an interesting diving spot or a treasure hunting opportunity. It's where 46 people lost their lives that night in 1956. It's where over 1,000 others experienced one of the most terrifying events of their lives. It deserves to be treated with dignity. Every artifact removed should be carefully preserved and studied. Every photograph taken should be shared with the public so that everyone can learn from these discoveries. This isn't about personal glory or profit. It's about preserving history for future generations. The robot submarine broke the surface of the ocean after its long ascent. The support vessel's crew immediately went to work, carefully lifting the machine back onto the deck. The collection basket was opened, and the metal box was removed with extreme care. It would be taken to a specialized conservation laboratory where experts would spend weeks or even months carefully opening it and preserving whatever was inside. The process couldn't be rushed. After 67 years underwater, any contents would be extremely fragile. But even before they knew what was in the box, the mission was already considered a huge success. The video footage alone was priceless. Hours and hours of high-definition imagery showing parts of the SS Andrea Doria that had never been documented before. Researchers would study this footage for years, learning new things about the ship's construction, about how it sank, about how underwater environments preserve historical sites. Students around the world would watch these videos and be inspired to study marine archaeology, ocean engineering, or history. And the exploration isn't over. The team is already planning their return trip. They want to go back to that blocked corridor. They want to understand why it was sealed from the inside. What was beyond that barrier? Was there something dangerous? Was someone trying to protect something? Or is there a simpler explanation that they just haven't thought of yet? The only way to find out is to go back down there and investigate further. Perhaps there are other sealed cabins waiting to be discovered. Other sections of the ship that have remained completely untouched since 1956. The Andrea Doria is enormous, and despite numerous expeditions over the decades, much of it remains unexplored. Every mission reveals new details, new stories, new mysteries. It's like peeling back layers of history, each one revealing something unexpected. What makes this particularly exciting is that we're living in a golden age of underwater exploration. The technology gets better every year. Robots become more sophisticated. Cameras capture more detail. Battery life extends, allowing longer missions. Soon we might be able to create complete 3D maps of the entire wreck, showing every room, every corridor, every detail. Future generations might be able to explore the Andrea Doria virtually, walking through its halls without ever getting wet, seeing it exactly as it looked when it sank. But there's something about seeing these places in real time, even through a robot's camera, that creates a powerful emotional connection. When you watch that video feed and see a clock stopped at 11:45, you feel something. When you see children's toys scattered on a cabin floor, you feel something. When you see a tea service set up for a social gathering that never happened, you feel something. That's the power of these discoveries. They make history real. They make the past tangible. The story of the SS Andrea Doria is well known. The collision with the Stockholm, the dramatic rescue operation, the investigation that followed. But until now, we've mostly known the big picture. We knew about the ship's specifications, its route, the number of passengers. We knew the timeline of events that night. What we didn't know was the intimate details, the small personal moments, the individual stories of the people who were there. These robotic explorations are giving us access to those stories in ways we never had before. And maybe that's the most important thing we can take away from these missions. History isn't just about dates and events and famous people. It's about everyone. It's about the ordinary travelers on an ocean liner who just wanted to get from Italy to America. It's about the crew members who worked hard to keep the ship running smoothly. It's about the children who played with toys while their parents dreamed of new opportunities. All of their stories matter. All of them deserve to be remembered and honored. The cabins of the SS Andrea Doria have kept their secrets for 67 years. Now, finally, those secrets are beginning to emerge. The robot has shown us what waited in the darkness all this time. And while we've answered some questions, we've raised many more. That's the nature of exploration. Every discovery leads to new mysteries. Every answer creates new questions. And that's what keeps us coming back, keeps us searching, keeps us trying to understand the past. The mission continues. The next expedition is being planned, and there's no telling what other revelations might be waiting down there in the cold, dark waters of the Atlantic. Perhaps there are more sealed cabins. Perhaps there are documents that survived in waterproof containers. Perhaps there are answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet. The only way to know is to keep exploring, keep documenting, keep learning. Are you ready to see what else is hidden down there? Are you prepared for the next chapter in the story of the Andrea Doria? Because this is just the beginning. The robotic submarine will return. The cameras will roll again. And when they do, we'll all get to witness history revealing itself. One cabin at a time, one artifact at a time, one story at a time. The past isn't really gone. It's just waiting to be rediscovered.